Okay then, welcome to the webinar. We have 4 senior hotel executives with us today, and the topic is technology and the guest experience. This is going to be sort of an open discussion, and we want to make sure that you all can participate as well. So there is a Q&A section on the Zoom interface, in which if you have any questions at any time, please go ahead and post those questions, and we'll try to get to them as best we can. I just want to kind of start off with an intro, and on this topic, I'd say that I've been working with hotel companies, advising them one way or the other for over 20 years. And in that period of time, one of the things I've always noticed is that there's always been this concept that hotels as an industry don't necessarily use technology to the extent that they could in their product offerings as, say, compared to other industries. And the question is always, I've always wondered is why is that? You know, there's always this feeling that, wow, we're always a little slow to upgrade to the next greatest technology. And I think the more I think about it, I think culturally hotels think of themselves kind of a little bit as the ultimate analog industry, because at their core, it's really just about putting heads in beds. Hotels are fulfilling the basic need of shelter for travelers at the most basic level. However, over time, you know, since the first taverns or what have you, I think the value proposition that has evolved in the hotel industry is this concept of service. We are all saying it's not just a bed, it's all the other things that we will do for you that will make you feel at home, yet also special at the same time. So that evolved into handshakes and welcomes and breakfast and room service and turn down service and chocolates on the pillow and all that good stuff that really epitomized what we think of as traditional hotel service. On the surface, that sounds very analog still, however. It doesn't sound very modern. It sounds like the perception of what the good life was maybe 40 years ago. But the truth is that we all live very different lives now than 40 years ago. And I think it's primarily because we're all living in a digital age. We're expecting immediacy and control over everything in our lives. We don't like to wait, and we're used to shaping the world around us through the choices that we make. And often that happens on our mobile phones. So let's go back and think about hotels. If the job of a hotel is to make you feel at home, but also to make you feel that it's a special experience, then hotels probably need to keep up with on par with our digital life at home, and then perhaps even add to it to make it more special. So I guess the point is that the intent of service hasn't really changed, but perhaps the method of delivery of service should change. And so that's why we're talking about technology and the guest experience. So what I'd like to do is go around the table and ask our panelists to introduce themselves, give a little bit of background. I'm going to go ahead and start with Gary Stringham.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Gary Stringham, Vice President of Revenue and Distribution at Springboard Hospitality. Have a pretty extensive background in hotels, starting right out of college and jumping right into revenue management and getting the unique opportunity to oversee a lot of hotels. And I think in an era when we started, to your point, of very little technology, and have gradually upgraded to where we are today. So good morning. Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. Good morning. We also have Shannon McCallum. Shannon?
Good morning. Shannon McCallum, Vice President of Hospitality for Volan Technology. Volan Technology is a security alarm and COVID tracing technology that's fairly new on the market. Prior to moving into technology, I spent 30 years in hospitality, most recently Vice President of Hotel Operations in Las Vegas at Aria Resort and Casino and Vdara Hotel and Spa. With 5,500 units at that complex, volume was always the challenge that went up against service. And I agree, technology really is something that can help us to be able to deliver upon the service promise so much more readily when we have this in existence. And again, giving guests the opportunity to be able to choose their path.
Thank you. Thank you. Marco Burlimann, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Marco Berliman. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations and Assets for Modus Hotels, located in Washington, D.C., with assets in Philadelphia, D.C., and some in the pipeline up and down the East Coast. Swiss original, maybe that's why I say some funny words. If you don't understand me, pardon in advance. But hospitality started for me in the kitchen. I'm a trained chef, then went to complete hospitality management degree. Travels brought me to Dubai with Jumeirah, and then to New York with Jumeirah, and then to Washington, D.C. So certainly seen different aspects and different execution on different levels within our sector, as well as executed by a vast diversity of different cultures. And, you know, it is an interesting topic, and I'm sure we're going to dive a little deeper into it. The thought that technology and guest experience or guest service needs to stand at odds with each other. I actually think that if used smartly and seamlessly, it works hand in hand to ensure that the customer has an awesome experience and that the guest experience is seamless. So looking forward to discussing it with all of you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marco. And then finally, we also have Hans Meyer, who's joining us from Amsterdam. Hans, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Great to be here. So thank Jos and Paul for the invitation. I'm currently co-founder and managing director of Zoku. Zoku is a new category in the hotel industry. It's a hybrid between a home and an office, topped with hotel services and what we call the social buzz of a thriving neighborhood. First, Zoku opened up in 2016 in Amsterdam. And like I just told my peers in the webinar, we are tripling our company in the next 6 months by opening Zoku Copenhagen and Zoku Vienna. Previously, I worked as initial creator and former founding partner of Citizen M. It's another chain that you might know. And before that, I worked for different hotel chains, always on the corporate level in operations and development. And very excited to participate in this conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Hans. So let's kick this off. Shannon, I'd like to start with you. You know, purely you had mentioned 5,000 units, or you know, ARIA and MGM in general. I mean, it's a huge operation. And I think one of the interesting things about, even though it is a casino hotel, what's very interesting is that from a data standpoint, you are seeing a huge number of guests going through your doors. And so I think just from a learning standpoint, at some point you start to realize what are the things that are going to be keeping guest satisfaction high that you are going to demonstrably do. And so specifically in the name of, in the category of technology, like what kind of hotel system decisions have you made that have been most important for keeping guest satisfaction at the highest level?
That's a great question. And that's one that I struggled with when I came to MGM in 2010, because I came from smaller hotel operations. And when I arrived at ARIA, we had 4,004 rooms. And the biggest guest dissatisfier were the lines in the lobby. And the last thing you want to do is start off a guest stay with lines that they have to wait in. It doesn't start the stay off on a very good foot. So absolutely finding a way at that point in 2010 to look at mobile check-in. And it didn't really exist at that point. There was 8 different ways to check out of the hotel, but no electronic way to check in due to the payment method complications and ID verification, which we have to do in Las Vegas due to the gaming. So it was a huge focus for me to be able to find a solution, to be able to ease the challenge of check-in, and also to be able to understand what time guests were arriving, because that helps with our staffing levels and to be able to staff accordingly to the times that the guests were arriving. So definitely the arrival experience and the implementation of a mobile check-in, which we use Stay in Touch to be our provider when we went into mobile check-in.
Excellent. And that was, I think that was Stay in Touch's largest implementation at that point, you know, obviously with all those rooms. And I remember actually going there, and it was almost like sort of like a white label solution where you would actually have a check-in desk that was separate for mobile check-in to pick up keys and things of that nature. I just want to let everyone know that we're going to put out a poll right now, and then we're going to talk about the results of the poll momentarily after the next question. But for the poll that we're running today, the question is really, for this budget season, are you planning to invest in any kind of digital mobile technology that was going to enhance your guest experience? This is very important right now because obviously it's not like a normal budget season, and we are looking at things that are going to not just be a nice to have, but anything that goes into the budget now with the uncertainties of the market is going to really, you're making these decisions because you think it's going to somehow create value just to help with the recovery and on the long term as well. So we're interested in seeing if you're going to be planning to invest in any digital or mobile. Marco, I want to go back to something that you said in your introduction, or kind of like dive in a little bit deeper on that. You know, many hoteliers still feel that service is kind of an in-person concept, and in this notion of digital as being service kind of actually erodes the value proposition of hospitality. You know, what are your thoughts here? Do you mentioned something that you feel like there was like a balance that can be struck, but so tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, I think, and this is a very good question, one that we have, and quickly to go back to Shannon's experience, our experience was sort of different, right? It's about breaking through the notion that by implementing digital ways and, you know, the notion that you're gonna sort of disconnect the customer from the service contacts, whether they be at the front desk, whether they be concierges, whether they be reservationists when you're calling, if you're still calling to make a reservation in the first place. But for us, it was truly the discussion of how much service does a customer really want in person and at what time during their stay, right? And we've played through many scenarios and landed pretty fair and square several years ago on the notion that the customer should, first of all, be in charge to make the decision whether they want to completely bypass the front desk and go straight to their room and make their phone their key and be able to use that. And that's for several reasons. Let's say you're a family with kids that arrives, whether you're a city hotel or a resort hotel, but you just traveled for a very long journey. And then at the front desk, someone, because it's part of their standards, goes for 5 minutes over every amenity the hotel has to offer. And then you hand over your identification, your credit card. There's so many transactional components included here that our opinion is, digitize and automize the components that are heavily transactional in the first place, free up the time of the colleagues so that they can be a point of contact for the customer on their terms. Maybe once they have been to their room and freshened up, maybe when they come back down and seek to have a drink at the bar, and then are open and willing and have the time to talk about what the neighborhood provides and what great little restaurants there are to visit. So we believe, and that's what I meant with balance. We believe that there is a balance to be struck to give the power to the customer to decide how deep into adaptation they want to go with these technologies, but they certainly should be offered. And secondly, free up the employees so that they can actually spend the time with those customers that feel that they want to spend the time. So it's sort of trying to have a bottom-up approach, considering the guest on the bottom, which is probably not the right analogy, rather than top-down, just because we hoteliers want it to be like that. The customers have to follow our lead. That's sort of silly in our opinion, I think.
That's very interesting. Hans, I'd like to switch over to you, and ask kind of a similar question. Your hotels are a little bit different. I've had the benefit of staying at a Zoku hotel. It's very cool. I actually had the Zoku uses mobile phone keys. So you can go actually directly straight to your room and use your phone to open the door of your room, your suite, your loft, as it were. there's technology all over Hans's hotels, but also at the same time, there is very much a focus on public spaces and public interactions. So I guess it's almost the same question to you, Hans. Based on your model, how do you see the same question?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. I think if you look to the reviews from on Zoku, you see actually a lot of reviews mentioning specifically our great staff and a great service. And it's a little bit how you perceive service. So what often happens is, of course, you can think about that there should be a person that's going to check you in. But there are quite a lot of legacy systems where actually it's a kind of a process where somebody is, I don't know what the person is doing behind the front desk, but it takes you around 10 minutes and 20 screens to go through it. And there's no personal interaction or whatsoever. And that basically kills the entire guest experience, because at the end of the day, if you look from a guest point of view, you want to have a warm welcome, you want to have a smile, you want to have somebody who's proactive and looking to help you instead of basically taking care of a process to check you in. That can be replaced by technology. At the end of the day, I feel that technology is great support. And also because we want to give people the opportunity to choose themselves. If they don't want to go to a relatively long check-in process, they can choose. But we also have long-staying guests who actually use Zoku as their springboard to get personal and professional connections in Amsterdam. They come here with an entirely different objective than somebody who's needing a room between a late night dinner and early flight the next morning. So it's actually the opportunities of choice that you give to your guests that actually makes the difference, and freeing up time that people can actually make the personal connection with their guests, which we feel is fundamental to a great guest experience.
So it's a selective application of technology to modify or break up like the traditional blockages, if you will, in the process.
Okay.
Gary, Springboard's portfolio includes a very wide range of hotel classes and types, and I know your personal professional experience, you've been in a lot of different kinds of hotels. Can you comment on how the impact of guest experience technology, or technology on guest experience, recognizing that they're not the same thing, does it differ by hotel type or class? How do you think about that?
I think it's the same experience. I think where we kind of go wrong is in the technology realm. We make it like too complicated as hoteliers. And so as someone goes to engage with that technology, there's 5 pages of forms you have to fill out, there's submit buttons. And so when we talk about the highlight of being impersonal, that's like the epiphany of that. And so I think where hotels need to focus if they go into this, and like our problem is somewhat different than Shannon in that we're really small hotels. And so we're trying to find that balance of using technology for efficiency, but also just providing the guest what they really want. And I think about your comment of technology being not personal, and frankly, when you go to a coffee shop and you look around, everyone's using their phone. So while we might feel it's impersonal, it's the way people want to communicate today. And so on the technology front, I think if we can look at what are the native ways that people are doing that and how are they communicating in that and then replicate that in what we do in hotels, that's going to be our biggest success. And so I know we've looked at a lot of ways and thoughts on how we do that. And so, the best way I could describe it is it's like texting with a friend. If you need a towel or you want to check in, you're texting a question, you're having a conversation. And I think that is probably as close as you can get to what people actually do in their everyday lives.
So in many ways, it's highly personalized, even though it may not be traditionally interpersonal, in terms of face-to-face. But you're right. If I'm looking at my phone all day, everything on the phone I have keen interest in, because it's actually very specific. I've created choices so that everything that's coming through my phone is very personal to me, and which is personalized experience, if you will. Marco, I want to jump back and talk a little bit more about this choice of service and get into the details of it a little bit. I think that one of the things that when we talk about technology and guests, we were off, and you had mentioned the benefits of, say, you have a family checking in and the chaos and everything and all that. Does the acceptance or the use of guest technology fall along recognizable lines of business versus leisure, younger versus older, or is it starting to be distributed across? Because I think that there's probably a lot of hoteliers who may think, well, we could put a kiosk in the front lobby, or we could say, send them an upgrade offer on their phone, but we're finding that we don't really serve millennials, and so therefore it's not really our game. What's your insights on that based on your observations?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly sort of a generational gap a little bit in terms of adapting these things from our observation. And we have hotels, so we have I would say conventional hotels, larger rooms, kitchenettes, and then we have micro hotels. We've been pioneering micro hotels in Washington, D.C., as well as in Philadelphia, with different brands, Hotel Hive, Motto, as well as Pod. And the interesting, and I get to the final point in a minute, but the interesting part is when we opened up Pod Hotel in Washington, D.C. in 2017, we thought this is a millennial geared product, right? So we expected hotel open up. We expected, okay, so here come all the millennials. And we were utterly surprised, first of all, by the great diversity in guests that have arrived, specifically diversity in age. We did not expect there to be older people that are traveling, whether it's for leisure or for business, to Washington, D.C., because we did think the product is millennial geared. And that was a great learning lesson for us to sort of pause and then see, well, how does that now impact the adaptation of technology? And there is, I think, a notion that in that type of hotel that was originally, I guess, sort of conceptualized around the younger traveler, even if people, and I hate to make a young or older distinction here, but even older people that would stay there are still relatively high adopters. And then maybe on the conventional hotel side, where we have properties that have a lot of returning guests, they're a little slower to adapt that. But that's probably also because of the choice at which hotel they're staying, right, that they've made. So I think it's not necessarily an age gap, but it's more about what type of property the guest chooses. And then if an older person that's very comfortable around technology is obviously going to adapt it, and the younger not so much. I also want to add one more thing. I think that the original question about whether hoteliers are hesitant to sort of accelerate automation and digitization, that has sort of been upended by the pandemic, I believe, quite a bit. And I would be interested what other panelists think here too, because people that before perhaps were hesitant or were seeking the personal contact at check-in or other contact points throughout their stay and their journey were all of a sudden hesitant to do so to protect themselves and the colleagues, and the adaptation rate has certainly accelerated a lot. And that's just our observation in our small universe, but that's probably an interesting second part. Not that I want to take the questions out of your hand, Paul, but I guess that may be an interesting thing to explore.
I think it's really interesting, and I'd be interested to see, if anyone else has sort of had an observation that, maybe that older couple who would otherwise like to talk to somebody now is more wary about talking to somebody and is looking for a way to, have a more streamlined experience where they can just get into their room and not linger too much in the lobby. I don't know, Gary, or you seen anything like that, or?
I haven't seen that trend, but what I'll say is I think COVID has helped us in a way of, look, this was already a trend before COVID, whether we realized it or not, or wanted to talk about it. I think what COVID's done is allowed us to have a conversation with ownership groups. And to your question about budgets, we're not doing budgets next year, but if we were, and on this topic, because of COVID, we think there is this need and this trend for technology now. It was there before, but now as we continue to live through this and even come out of it, I think that it's going to be an expectation of travelers to at least have the option of this idea of touchless check-in or touchless communication. And I think what I'm predicting we'll see is that'll become a norm. It sort of forced us and escalated the trend that was already happening.
No, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. I just want to remind our audience that if you have any questions at all, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get that sort of dynamic going. I want to share the results of the poll. We had 78% of the folks watching this said that they were planning to invest in digital mobile in this budget season. Although some of us do not have a budget this year, but I think that's interesting. That it's and maybe it's because of what Gary's talking about, the acceleration based on the requirements of social distancing and things like that. Maybe that's driving the motivation. So I want to dive into some more about specific technologies and some of the considerations of them. We've talked a little bit about early check-in and late check-out. I want to talk about this concept of value payment. It used to be, you could say, I'm checking in early, and if the room was available, they say, sure. Used to be, can I ask for a late checkout? And you call down to the front desk and they say, sure. However, in recent years, those have been monetized because I think that there is an appetite amongst customers to be able to, amongst guests to actually be able to, again, make a transaction to control their experience a little bit more. And plus, if they can do it for the mobile phone, maybe what they're paying for is not just the late stay, but the ease in which they can do the late stay. So I'd like to kind of throw this concept of whether it should be charged for or whether it should be not, some of these new monetizations. Hans, what do you think about this topic?
Yeah, I think it's an can you rephrase the question, Paul? I just lost.
So I would say when it comes to charging people for early check-in or late checkout, that maybe traditionally was not done that way. And those are the key ones, but I think there's probably some other things that as time goes on, we may see more monetization of services as we have on the airlines, where there's a lot of now there's like lots of bits and pieces that used to be part of the package that you're kind of adding on. And the question is, culturally, is our target audience accepting of that? Is it an opportunity for kind of free revenue for hotels, or is it something that is maybe we should stay away from?
Well, maybe a pretty actual subject in our company is that, given the fact that in normal hotel rooms and studio apartments, the bed is always the most dominant piece of furniture, a lot of hotel rooms are not suitable as a kind of an office for a day. At Zoku, we have hidden the bed and the kitchen table is paramount. And that gives us actually the opportunity where a lot of people need or have to work from home, but don't want to work from home. So actually, we've been selling quite a lot of those work lofts, as we call them, since COVID-19. Now, the interesting part, what's coming out of there, is that you start to talk about capacity, because in theory, it is possible for us to sell the room during the night and then clean it up in the morning and then sell it during the day, which is an interesting, I think, revenue model, because with all the distributed workforces, with remote working coming up, it means that hotels also can go into the co-working space. Now, if you go to the co-working space and you think about, okay, what made Uber and Airbnb successful, that was basically unused capacity. That you basically have a square meter, okay, and how can I use this square meter 24/7? Because yeah, that's the big benefit that hotel companies have. They have a 24/7 business model. However, we never thought about that opportunity, and our products are not always suitable for that. But if you want to do that in a proper way, it's actually, you definitely need technology. And then ideally you want to go in a kind of a pay-as-you-go model. So do I need a room for 8 hours to have a great night's sleep? or do I want to have 14 hours per day? Or if I want to have it just 4 hours a day for a meeting? I think these are the big opportunities that we are going to see in our industry. And I definitely would love to see the technology coming to that and basically supporting that opportunity. And then it becomes a kind of a pay-as-you-go model. And then you don't actually talk anymore about early check-in or late check-out. You just talk, okay, I would love to have this room for so many hours, and I'm prepared to pay for that.
So you would say that looking forward into the future, there's probably going to be kind of a breaking down of the traditional product set. And so therefore, the monetization of bits and pieces, if you will, is probably going to be acceptable and welcomed.
Yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity for hotels here. Well, it was a conversation I had a year ago with a colleague of us. He's running a hotel on Fifth Avenue in New York. And he said, okay, my lobby on one of the most expensive locations in the world is empty, your lobby is full. So there is a kind of an opportunity over there. However, hoteliers are not always, I think, used to think like that there is a huge opportunity of space. And that's what I've learned over the last few years. A lot of all those tech companies is, so I didn't learn a lot from hotel companies, but I actually learned from a lot of successful business models out of our industry and tried to adapt them to a kind of hotel model. But what I learn is that technology is so much behind in our industry, and there's a great opportunity over there.
Right. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, when you invest in a property that's happening to, run a business in it, the primary investment for the hotel building owner is that they have space, and they're trying to get the most value out of every part of that space. And some of that is not just the space, but some of it may be the time. There's a lot more. It's not just a night that you're selling. Maybe there's a lot more things you can break it down into if you look at what the market needs. Yeah. Another topic I want to talk about is digital messaging. In recent years, there's been an increased attention to the potential of digital messaging in hospitality. You're actually seeing, because of COVID, an uptick in digital messaging in, say, the restaurant industry, where if anyone has ever done curbside service, there's a lot of kind of texting back and forth. I'm here, I'm ready for my food, I'm in the black car, et cetera, et cetera. So I think digital messaging covers a broad range of areas and topics. But Shannon, I'd like to understand what your thoughts are on the current use of digital messaging and what the potential future of it might be for hotels.
Absolutely. In Las Vegas and at my most recent hotel, we actually had text for service. And the implementation of that was really exciting because it gave our guests another avenue in which to reach out to us. I think as Gary was talking about, the behavior of our guests have changed. People want to text message. They want to communicate in the way that they do every day. And the thought of having to pick up the phone and wait while it rings and then have it go through a phone tree is frustrating for our guests. And due to volumes in Las Vegas, it gave our guests another opportunity to text. That being said, being a luxury hotel, it was important to us that we maintained our standards, not only on the phone or in person, but also the way that we messaged with our guests. So making sure that there were standards in place to keep the service levels up. But the great thing about text messaging as well was the ability to be able to keep history. So for the system to be able to recognize who the guest was, and even if that agent had gone home, another agent could pick up the conversation and continue it through without having to go back and ask for more information. So it was a better system to be able to use. It enabled one agent to handle 5 or 6 people at the same time, so they could multitask, which you can't do when you're on the phone. And again, be able to communicate in the way that the guest really wanted to. And I think there's so much more opportunity for us to be able to use texting and services like that. There was also the opportunity to use video with the text, which I wasn't really a fan of, because then I had to police people with what they look like that day, and and what's going on in the background as they're doing their video chat. But I do think text messaging is a huge asset for the operation.
Yeah, it's interesting. The data piece, the continuity, And also probably there's probably some benefit that it is a slightly asynchronous communication method. So it doesn't necessarily have to be in immediate and real time. And that allows maybe for some multitasking of staff members. So let's talk about another technology, specific technology. Let's talk about upselling. This is a ROOMDEX webinar. So I feel like we should probably mention that. Marco, what do you see as, we've been talking a lot about like service, but we've also been talking about like making choices that control your own experience. How do you see the role of automated upselling within a hotel's overall service proposition, specifically from the point of view of how it is delivered and actually what is offered, what is delivered?
Yeah, I think that's one of the, and I always say that it's one of the last frontiers, but then it actually isn't because a new frontier comes up. But certainly I think it is one of those topics where in the past we always thought, well, no problem, we don't need, and there were systems out there that we have been using in the past, but they never were integrated with the PMS. It didn't take inventory out in real time. It didn't sell based on attributes of whatever the room and or location and so forth would be giving. So it was cumbersome, and no surprise, the success wasn't really there. Then there is the notion that, well, let's have a great upsell program at the front desk. And of course, all of our front desk colleagues are going to participate, and we put an incentive in place. But the entire behavior sort of needs to shift. And again, these programs were sometimes successful and sometimes not, but it makes sense in my opinion, in our opinion at Modus, that this becomes a component of smart revenue management, because there is clearly an opportunity to either create additional room types, to make sure that the attributes each room has or provides are clearly listed out, and then make sure that we can target the customer based on whichever segment they are traveling in or their reservation comes through, and can offer sort of a bespoke way for them to have the opportunity to buy up into something that we think they may actually purchase. And that is a very interesting proposition. I think ROOMDEX is onto something, specifically because it fixes some of the base challenges we had previously. It does interface with your PMS. It does take out the inventory once it's sold. It has the option to go attribute based or just by general topics. So, there are certain habits that obviously need to change along on our side operationally, because if we've been in the habit usually to oversell our base room type and automatically upgrade everyone into higher room categories, then we're depriving and starving the system of an opportunity to sell. So I don't want to go on too long, but I think that's that's going to be an important component as our hotels recover, and every dollar counts, to make sure that we can maximize it while the customer is not only in the belief, but while we're doing the customer service by bespokely offer him the opportunity to buy what he wants or she wants.
I mean, in a way, it sort of dovetails a little bit with what Hans was saying in terms of, thinking a little bit more clearly about your revenue opportunities that you have in your hotel, and that it's not just a simple, max out your, standard room nights, and that's your potential. There's a lot more potential in your hotel if you can really re-examine it. So Gary, what have we missed? We've talked about a few different specific technologies. If you're looking at one of your hotels, maybe you guys acquire a new hotel or whatever, they're going to make some decisions about what they need to do to kind of raise the game. You want to make them a Springboard Hospitality hotel. What are the kinds of things that you are saying that those hotels should be investigating and looking into, specifically maybe just to help with the recovery, or even thinking beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a revenue guy, so of course I'm going to promote things like upselling systems and automation in your rate strategy. But I think overall, it kind of goes back to this notion of why hotels haven't adopted technology. And it's because we work with all of these disparate systems. And so if I was advising a hotel on what they should look at now and even coming out of COVID, I would say probably, how are we using technology to make smarter decisions, especially as we are in this time of who knows what's going on with digital marketing these days. It's all over the place. It's crazy. Some markets are bidding, some aren't. So what is the technology that's really going to allow you to finite your information to a point where if you've made a smart decision and it's working or not? Going back to the disparate systems for a second, it's how do we connect that marketing data with our guest data? And then we talked a lot about messaging. How do we bring that all together, and how do we get smarter? And so someone was talking about room grade offers. And so the example I would give there is at hotels, we love emails and we love pop-ups for whatever reason. But you have to get a step deeper and say, can we now understand when is the optimal time for that message to go out, whether that's multi-prong, email, pop-up, text, whatever you choose. What's the most successful in converting? So maybe text message because we're getting in front of a guest. And then can we experiment with what actually to charge for that upgrade? And so getting down to that level in all of those areas in a test and learn scenario is going to be really vital as we come out of COVID. We have reduced dollars and we need to spend them very smartly. And then the last thing I would say on this integrated sort of notion is we have to get better about knowing things about the users and the guests we're interacting with. It's not one size fits all. And, there's kind of this thing right now where if you log in through your membership component, then we know about you. But how do we overcome that? There shouldn't be a login. It should be as simple as just understanding if we have information about them, which could be how did they get to us? What site did they come from? How are they using mobile? Can we do something with the phone number? Because that's really what's going to set hotels apart. If they can focus on what is that information they know about the guests to inform the decisions they make moving forward in communication, that's how they're going to be more successful and actually make the technology personal in a whole different way than ever before.
I would agree with that. And I think that what you're seeing, and again, just to tout ROOMDEX again, I think you're seeing a lot of new technologies coming out that is, I think we already have a lot of data, even on new reservations, even on non-loyalty members. It's a matter of looking at the data that we currently have and being smart about analyzing it and pulling out of it some learnings that we can apply to increase personalization and therefore increase the improvement of the guest experience. So we have a couple questions. We haven't had any questions from the audience, but I want to finish up with two questions, and this is going to go out to everybody here. I'm really interested in this age of reviews. Has there been any specific digital technology that anecdotally has generated the most positive feedback? And Shannon's talking about check-in at ARIA. Hans is talking about a myriad of different technologies. Just across the board, is there anything that you're getting a lot of expressed delight from your specific guest about that had to do with technology specifically? And feel free to openly respond.
Well, what I could say is that Zoku is a pretty touchable concept, as I would say. So if you arrive at Zoku, you get a handshake. Our staff is hugging all of the day. Our culture is very family style. It's one of I think, of the key strengths of Zoku, that our service is incredibly personal. However, COVID-19 basically said to us, okay, you have to keep your distance.
No more hugs.
We said, okay, sorry, no more hugs. Well, actually, we very much believe in physical distancing, but we don't believe in social distancing. We have quite a lot of people staying with us for longer periods of time. So I think basically what we did, we invested in contactless, that in any case, people still can make contactless payments, contactless reservations, contactless order their food and beverage. So again, we give people a kind of a choice. But what we also did is, given the fact that community is such an important role, we try to think, okay, how can we still connect people through technology, that they can easier interact with each other, basically take away the hurdles. And especially if you can imagine, if you come to Amsterdam and you've never been in the city, you don't speak the language, you left your friends and family behind, and you're also in COVID-19, then you might need some tools to get you through this crisis. So we put a lot of effort on that. But basically, I think people were most enthusiastically about, again, giving the choice that people could do everything contactless. And I think that is, and of course, COVID-19 has been a catalyst for this development, but I actually see that people are really liking the technology, and the interaction is going to be different. So no handshakes, but still people look at each other, have conversations with each other, but then a little bit more distance.
Can I jump in as well? The thing that I've seen in Las Vegas that's been really embraced, which you would have thought was crazy before COVID, was the use of QR codes for menus.
Yeah.
So due to the volume of customers in restaurants, and think about pool service as well, where the menus would blow away in the wind. The adoption of QR menus on your phone has been enormous, and the guests are actually happy about it because they don't have to touch anything. So it's really amazing to me to see the change in the customer behavior. And I can say this same thing with the adoption of mobile check-in. Before, mobile check-in was really a choice, and really the demographic in the large hotels was the convention guests that were coming in that didn't want to have a conversation with anyone, that just wanted to get into their room and drop their bag and go to the registration desk, or younger demographics, like Marco was saying as well, that really like the technology. But now you see everybody using the contactless systems because it's something they realize now that they want. And COVID has actually had a huge impact on that. So I think all of those types of technologies are really receiving a much more favorable outlook than they did prior to COVID.
Yeah, I think the QR code is, I think everybody gave it up for dead about a year and a half ago, and now it's got new life.
Second life.
Yeah, it's been pretty. I work with some restaurant technology companies, and it's amazing. And I think everybody has probably, if you've gone out and you've experienced it, again, I think it's pointing us back to the personal devices. Of course, it's going to be helpful to make sure that you have your Wi-Fi up to speed, so make sure everybody can see the menu. But anybody else have anything that anecdotally they get some specifically good kudos for from their customers?
That was a hard one for me to think about, only because I don't think I've ever seen a review where guests have actually commented about the technology. Like, you have an awesome website, or I really loved how you got me to buy an extra feature. But it's the expectation. And so I think maybe a good measure of that is, does it play into the overall satisfaction? But yeah, it was an interesting thought to think about. Has anyone ever said, we really like this specific technology?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of expectation. I remember when Zoku just first opened up, and I went to visit it, and then I saw some reviews, and it was a new concept at that time. And honestly, I don't remember how many years ago this was. But every review that I read of it after that it initially opened up mentioned the fact that you had the mobile check-in, you could open the door with your phone. But maybe as Gary said, maybe now we're at this point of expectation, and it's not novel anymore, and the expectation is there. That's why people are not talking about that as much. That could be the case. So we're coming up towards the end of our webinar. I want to thank everybody for their participation. I think this has been really, really interesting. And it's nice to speak to hoteliers with such a deep amount of experience who can give us great perspectives on this. I'd like each of you to kind of go around the table, and basically I'd like to ask each panelist to kind of crystal ball it and look into the future, what they know about technologies that are out there, or maybe technologies that you think should be out there. How are things going to evolve in the next 5 years? I want to start with Marco with this. What do you see? And this is kind of a long-term concept.
Well, first of all, I think the current trend is going to continue with customers wanting to go contactless for at least the transactional components of what happens on a day-to-day basis. I also think that one of the things, and I think Gary mentioned that before, so many of these systems are very siloed and not integrated with each other. And I do think that and I wonder whether this is crystal balling it or wishing for it, but I think at some point it would be helpful if our industry finds a way to have better integration amongst platforms between customer-facing technology as well as back-of-house technology, so that the experience becomes more seamless for the guests, but also that there is an efficiency component, because again, right, after all, what we're seeking here as well is an ROI, and we want to make sure that these technologies have a positive payback for our owners, and therefore the increased efficiency is certainly a huge desire, and it's a wish, but it's hopefully also what I see in the crystal ball.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think we have to. It's one thing to have what the guests are interacting with, but sometimes the key technology is the technology behind the technology. You know, the ability to actually connect these systems. Shannon, what do you think?
You know, I think Marco hit it on the head. You know, in both cases, the changes that we've seen, many of these changes, especially contactless, are going to live on in the future. It's, and I hate using the term the new normal, but I think more people will continue to embrace technology as a positive. I also agree about the siloed technology. We've got concierge that have 17 different systems that don't integrate with each other and are not efficient. So I think that there's going to continue to be a movement towards really integrating systems that aren't currently talking to each other. But then I also go back to what Hans says. We have to find different ways, if we're going to integrate more technology, to make sure that our guests feel the presence of our team and that service component is still there. And we're going to have to get very creative on how we're inserting our service to personalize the experience for our guests. And I think we have to really shift to that once we get past all of the implementation of the technology that we're seeing today.
Excellent, excellent. Gary, you're looking into the future. We've already talked about like what you think that the hotel should be looking at. Is there a technology direction on top of what they should be looking at that you'd like to see coming in the future? You know, right now we're all under, this severity of COVID. 3 years from now, we may not be. What kind of technologies are we looking at then?
You know, I'm going to go a little bit different direction in terms of the technology question. I mean, I completely agree with Marco and Shannon on those fronts. I think for hotels specifically, and where some of the technology is shifting, is we traditionally have like these really old systems. I don't know if anyone has heard of Marriott and Marcia, but I think that where technology is headed and needs to go is, how do we develop a UI and something that's like is easy to use without 3 weeks and 4 years of training. And so I think that's a huge need. I think we see some technology going there today as they relaunch their products or launch new products. Admittedly, our workforce is expecting it. They just want to push a button and make it work. Like none of these days of like having to research 10 systems deep just to find out where the error occurred. And so I think that's where we're going. I think that's where we'll continue to go. And I think if we want to get to this point of being able to offer great technology and services, we have to get there, because our people have to know how to execute and use it.
I'm a huge fan of this concept of consumer grade technology for business applications. There's no question about it. Nobody trains you how to use your iPhone. Somehow you get on it and you're able to use your iPhone. You know, business applications, business is my own little editorial. I think business software companies have too often in the past just said, oh, we don't have to worry about it. We'll train them. They'll be trained. We don't, it's okay if it's confusing and difficult and challenging. We're going to train them. And that's a crutch. You know, they can do better. Apple's one of the biggest companies in the world, and it's because they figured out how to make things simple. It's as simple as that. Hans, wanted to leave this webinar with you in terms of the last question. I think that you've been shown to be very insightful in terms of what may be happening in the future. Your product is being on kind of the leading edge. People are following or mimicking your product as time goes on. It's 5 years from now. What are the technologies that you think must be in place in order to improve guest experience?
So I think, first of all technology that's actually supporting and improving the guest experience, basically giving people the opportunity to give great service instead of diving into their Excel sheets or whatever they need to go through kind of a process. That's one. Secondly, it's optimizing basically your square feet or your square meters. How can you create additional revenue over there? And that's also why we decided to go with ROOMDEX and to add it to our tech stack, because I think I see there's a great opportunity there also to create extra revenue. But if I look to, if I hear what Marco says, what Shannon says, and what Gary says, I really would like to add to that. I think that our mutual biggest frustration is that we work with all those legacy systems. I read an interview of a former colleague of mine in a magazine this week, and he said, okay, for this big hotel chain, I need to know all the codes out of my head. I need to press 3 buttons, then I can put on a peace pipe on, and I can just wait, and hopefully in 10 minutes I get some information out. The most interesting part is, okay, what would we do if we have a white sheet of paper and develop with all the technology around us and leaving all the legacy behind? The big challenge here is that we always want to build our tech stack on very wobbly foundations, which are from, I think, an age which is already gone. And I see here the big opportunity in great user interface, great user experience, but at the back, all those systems are automatically connected, saving a lot of frustration, giving me a far better dashboard to run my company on, and make sure that also my guest, my staff engagement is at the highest level there. So there's a huge opportunity to win in our industry. We're not very much known for our technology, and I think that's absolutely fair to say. I feel that if we are able as an industry to basically get our technology right up to the same level that all those big tech firms come, then our user experience will benefit a lot from that. And that's also, I think, our basically our guest reviews. You will definitely see that back.
Well, I agree with you. I think that the opportunity to provide better guest experience applications is dependent upon a world where we have open APIs, maybe app marketplaces where we can try new things, put in new applications, see what works. Diversity of technology is only going to bloom after that. Anyway, I want to thank again everybody for attending. As usual, this webinar has been recorded and will be uploaded to the ROOMDEX website later today, and you'll receive an email and a link as well. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us at info@roomdex.io. Thank you, panelists. We really appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.